to Friday morning. I was speaking earlier, I'm looking forward to the weekend. It's been a long, tedious week. There's Felix. Hey, Felix, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay. All right, let me just back up and ask regarding yesterday, our module on lighting. There were 3 components that we covered in it, and it was studio, portraiture, and tabletop or product photography. And that's kind of that was from our feedback session. And basically we were able to cover about 3 bullets off of our feedback session in that one module. We got into the lighting module about how to use light. One of the things that photographers typically don't do well as they start out is understand how to use and manipulate light. Most of them, the major thing they're concerned about is getting a good exposure, and that deals with the quantity or how much light you got. But when you go into a situation, any situation, you always want to assess the lighting conditions before you start shooting. What kind of light do I have? How much of it do I have? And how can I use it to my benefit? A lot of times you can't control it, but you can do the best you can in terms of manipulating it and doing what you want to, coming out with the images that you want to come out with. So with that said, are there any things that we need to go back and redo or review on lighting, the module we covered on yesterday? Those who were here on yesterday. I'll pull up.
Bob, can you make sure that we get the copy of it, the video, the recorded copy, because I'd like to review it also on my own.
Yeah, I'll have to check with Gabe is our person. Maybe Cynthia can do that for us. Maybe she can pull up the recording from yesterday and I'll make sure we can get that. But let me just make a note to do that. Usually Cynthia will send her recordings right away. So, but I've not gotten any from Gabriel, so I'll just ask him.
Right, Bob, what you'll need to do is get with Gabe because he hosts your Thursday classes and they go directly to him. So
Right.
Contact Gabe and have him begin to send them to you every Thursday.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah. Cynthia's been sending us the ones we do on Friday morning with her, and Friday afternoon they come right away, and I can post those in the team room. But yeah, what was it? That was Diane. I'll see if I can make that happen there. Any other questions regarding that module? Do we want to
Thank you.
Look at it real quick, or just briefly run through it, just for the benefit of those who are not here on yesterday?
I'd like you to run through it again if you can. Help me out with this. Is the Thursday class for beginners or newbies? And then today's class is for advanced. Are you going to continue like you used to? What you do on Thursday, you would redo it on Friday morning, or no? What's going on?
The Thursday classes was set up basically for our beginners, but for the most part, and we had a few people, it was about 4 or 5 people that identified themselves as not beginners, but basic, who had missed some of the modules that we were talking about from an advanced standpoint. So I tried to go back and look at the list of things that they wanted to do and to kind of cover things. The module that we did on yesterday was a module that we've had a while back. It was a long time. We did the module back.
I recall that one.
And what I did was I just kind of revised it a little bit, but it was new information for a lot of, for most of our basic people.
Okay, 11 o'clock. Okay.
Barrington, you got some, there you go. Barrington got some crosstalk back there. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that I do something that covers a basic group on Thursday. Now, a lot of times the stuff we cover on Thursday that's called basic may be good review or good remedial for some of the advanced folk. So if you're able, but I will kind of go through it briefly recap Friday morning, because Friday I'm dedicating primarily to the advanced group. Let me go back and show you what I'm pulling from. I'll pull up a share screen to kind of clarify, because I've kind of got a little bit off course myself with that. And hopefully you're seeing screen okay at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I pulled off the copy, and I'm looking at that primer, and it was very, very well put together. But I can't make all of the classes, and I was just wondering if I'm in the right mindset to at least get to the Friday class or at least get to the Thursday class.
Thursday class.
Yeah, well,
That's-
I mean, the question was, will you be doing a recap? And I'll do a quick recap for both for the Thursday session, if it's something that the advanced group can handle as well. So yeah, I'll do that. But we did portrait photography, lighting, indoor and outdoor. This is Sharon C. She's one of our newer people, and taking better small product images. This is from Cali. So that was what I was trying to focus on
Okay.
for the Thursday class. And then we're going to do today, we're going to do this lens all inclusive. This is from Gwen. These are all basic modules here, but we've already done this module here way back when. But again, it's good review sometimes because we forget about these modules. And that's one of the things I mentioned on yesterday was that perhaps we need to tie some homework around the modules so that we can better submit them from a learning standpoint. So I'll be looking at doing some of that going forward. If we do a module on, say, on portrait photography, maybe in the next couple of weeks we'll have an assignment on portrait photography using the lighting that we discussed, et cetera. But we'll do a quick recap anytime it's needed on anything. That's why I kind of open up and say, do we want to talk about anything that was covered yesterday or on the previous day? And there's some other things I want to do for the basic class, which will entail workflow, entail some basic stuff in Lightroom. But the only person we've got who is not into Lightroom at this point is probably Barrington. He's the only one still getting images coming from an attachment standpoint. So I don't know if we need to go through workflow, but we don't. What I'm getting at is that we don't have a lot of folk in the basic class are needing basic stuff. They've kind of dissipated. We had 4 new people. Angela was one. Angela Suong was another. And over the last few weeks, they've not been on the roster. They've not attended. So I don't know if we how to resolve that. But it's you guys' class, so we'll go back and you tell me how you want to do it. Should we do basic or should we just continue? We're set now to do basic on Thursday and advanced on Friday, modules that relate to both on Thursday and on Friday. So, but there may be some on a Thursday class, and that we'll just basically have to recap on Friday, and I'm okay with that, doing it that way. I don't want anyone to miss out on anything, so to speak. But again, the classes that we do on Thursday are centered around input from the people who consider themselves basic. And the classes that are done on Friday are centered around modules that we put together for those who consider themselves from the advanced standpoint. So I don't know if that answers your question. I feel kind of discombobulated as I've stated that, but that's kind of where we are. So with that said, let's just do a quick recap. If there's other questions, Felix, what you got? You just said something.
On lighting down below that I talked about, you did a lot on that yesterday. You can check that one off.
Yeah, that's all. You're looking at screen. This is portrait lighting.
Right here, down to the bottom.
Oh, okay. So that was different. Okay. Yeah, we could check that one off. This is from Felix.
Yeah.
Lighting awareness, handling various situations. Yeah. Yeah, we could check that.
That gave me a good idea of what you're talking about.
Okay, I understand. Okay. So yeah, we could probably do something with that one. Yeah, I'll do that. I can get my screen up here. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, all right, I'll check that off. I'll just put it highlighted in blue and then we'll be in red next week. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so, but this is a list I'm trying to work from. Go back and zero that out, center that view. So, I'm sorry, fit slide. So I can see, there we go. Okay, but we'll go through and check them off there. So, but again, anything that we do on Thursday that needs to be recapped on Friday, we'll briefly go through it. It won't be like a major deal, but we'll briefly go through it and we'll go into the next module. Because if you recall, Friday we got 2 things we can do. We got open form. So So if we do something on Thursday, we got that open forum, which we could also include from a recap standpoint. We can go back and recap what we did the day before. So, and we've got this module on, and it's just an hour on the overview of the all-inclusive lenses, and then Friday afternoon we'll do the homework. So, okay. So with that said, let's just quickly run through that, because again, like I said, what I want to do. Maybe not this piece of homework coming up, which is week 2, but probably week 3, this will be revised to include some of the concepts from the lighting seminar, from the lighting module. Maybe an assignment that says take a portrait, you could use front lighting, side lighting, or back lighting, and use it creatively and go through the whole thing again. But it may be something along those lines. That's what I'm kind of thinking about doing. So, all right. So with that in mind, let me just go up here and do a quick recap on recent mirrorless cameras. We'd overview there, lighting revise. Let's take a look at this module here. Let's get rid of. Can we get rid of that? I don't know. Let's see. No, can we? What are you seeing on the screen now? Are you seeing?
See a little red dot and the little arrow.
Okay, I think I've got to stop this share and start it again because and just go to my desktop because I wasn't, there we go. Yeah, because the green box was around that one. There, okay, so you should be seeing my desktop at this point in time, and you should be seeing the primer on basic lighting.
Yeah.
And, okay, and I'll kind of run through this quickly. But this module was intended to, where's my cursor? There it is.
Do you have shares in Nikon?
Say again. Do I have shares in Nikon?
Get Kelly.
Yeah, I do. I sure do.
Well, I'm looking at the photos here. It says Nikon Corporation, Nikon.
No, this is that's the metadata. I just grabbed that from the website. But that tells you what camera was used. It tells you the f-stop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought this
I
was-
do have shares. I got a ton of their gear. So to speak. So yeah, I do have shares in it. But again, going back to this module is about small products, portraiture, and headshots. And the common theme out of this module was that there's certain things that I do for my own particular workflow or work style that transcends all 3 of these. For small products, I use basically the same lenses, which is the 85, the 105, and the, what was the other? It's 3 lenses, 85, 105, 60, yeah. 60 more, less limited, less so than I do the 105. For portraiture, it's the same lens. For headshots, it's the same lenses. So that was the deal there. And again, we talked about how to look at it from a lighting standpoint, how to identify light. I'll give some examples. The one on the left, the light's coming in from the left-hand side, fill reflector on the right side. And I'm doing portraits and tabletop the exact same way. It's one light, maybe 2 reflectors, or it's one light and maybe 1 reflector. So that's kind of what we were talking about on yesterday and showing the examples of how they should be done. Again, what I was looking to do with yesterday's session is to have you be able to look at light as you go into a situation and assess what type of light you got in that environment. We talked about basic understanding of lighting, source of it, natural, artificial, and no matter what you're doing, you're mimicking sunlight because all light is a derivative, if you would, of sunlight. Any lighting situation that you go into. And there's things you should be concerned about are the quantity, the quality, and the direction of a light, how that happens, and how you can control or manipulate that light. And we talked a lot about the tools that you would need, the backdrops, the light stands, the flash meters, incident meters.
She's back in.
And things, say again? And things of that nature. All three images here, we got 3 photos. I have a common trait. All of them were captured with 1 light and the fill and fill setup. And it's all very similar in terms of what I use. 1 light is a key light, and then I've got a couple of fill lights, which could be a reflector or could be another light if you want to use that. One on the left was done with window lighting, The two on the right were done with studio lighting, but it's one light, one main fill setup, and what have you. Camera doesn't matter, lenses are key. And again, that's when we got to this area. These are my three favorite lenses. My personal favorite is the 60, very sharp, the 105, very sharp, flat field lenses. And I did point out on yesterday that the 85 has a curved, most lenses will have this curved surface. Your micro lenses will have a flat field, which means they're not curved. If you look inside of the lenses, they're basically flat field. And they capture edge to edge sharpness very, very, very easily is what they do. And I don't want to go through the entire slide presentation. I just want to pick out some things. So let me just go back into my roll here. We talked a lot about, this is major here from yesterday's module. One light, one sun, that's your theory. All light you should start with a key light, and that key light, where is it? Let's go here. It all mimics natural sunlight or sun or moon. Is what it basically emulates. So your light can be from the left-hand side, from the right-hand side, from the front. So it's side lighting, front lighting. We got back lighting, and again, this is my favorite setup: one light with a fill reflector. And I gave you reasons for that. Well, if you're using one light and a reflector, you could never put back. You could never overfill. This is what's referred to as a 1:2 ratio. If these were equal, if you're using a silver reflector back here, then it gets close to a 1:1 ratio. But to keep lighting simple, use reflectors where you don't have to make all the various calculations. Was kind of the takeaway from that. Where is it here? This slide here shows you the various calculations that you're dealing with. If you got a main light set at f5.6, and then you got a fill light, that fill light should be one stop less than your main light. This will always be your light with the most, which gathers the most, which is the brightest, probably a better way of saying it, the brightest light. And then if you got a fill light, it'll be one stop less. If you got a hair light, it'll be one stop less than the previous light. If you got a backlight, it'll be, or you got a background light, it'll be one stop less, and then one stop less on the backlight as well. Lighting can get very complicated, is what can happen. And if you're not familiar with the premise of how you always have one main light and the other lights are always subordinate. We kind of walked through that yesterday, kind of like in detail. Talk about how to meter these. Someone said, how do you meter them? You meter them individually because all of this is cumulative once you turn them all at one time. So if I were setting up, I'd meter my main light at 5.6, and I'd shut that off and meter my fill light, that's at f8. Then I'd shut that off. Then I'd meter my hair light, that's at f11. Then I'd shut it off and meter my background light, and then I would meter my backlight 2, if you would. But they're all metered individually. And from a ratio standpoint, typically you want the main light and the fill light to be a 1:2 ratio, which means that the fill light will be half as bright as your main light, and so forth as you go back through the deal there. But to keep that simple, where is it? To keep that simple, I would use, where is it? Yeah, here we go. To keep that simple, that's not it. To keep that, I said that, that's repeated. Where is it? It is. But to keep that simple, one light and a reflector will give you a 1:2 ratio very easily. So that means you don't overfill this side of it. And again, this is, I've dropped in these stock option tags, Callie, from Nikon to show you the metadata that for the particular camera and lens that we're in use. And some of the 60mm lens as well. But there's you got one light and a reflector. Now you don't have to have multiple lights. You can use reflectors all around if you want to do that and get the same effect. I could take another reflector over here. I can't do it with the overhead hair light, but I could take two reflectors and one light and do everything I need to do from a lighting standpoint. We showed you another setup from a tabletop standpoint. Still, it's the very same thing. You've got a main light, which is your window. This is how this image was captured, which is your window. And then you got 2 reflectors on either side. So that's 1 light, main light, and 2 reflectors. That's what that basically does. All you're doing is taking a source light and manipulating that light or bouncing it around the subject to get a desired effect. The other thing we talked about was the shadow. Follow the shadow. The shadows will always tell you where the light is coming from. Sometimes you look at an image and you can't tell where the light is coming from, and that's usually a flat light. If there's no shadow, it's probably a flat light. But if a directional light in the image, you will always be able to find the shadow. And then we went through some supplemental material. This is some stuff I pulled out off the internet that will show these same lighting setups with you. You can use these from the standpoint of just going out creating some light source, some lighting situations, but they walk through it. And this is something free I pulled down from the internet. If you want to go out and look at it, here's the guide. Here's the website. The URL for the website is there. But they walk through lighting setups for each one. Soft light, but all light again is going to be derived of, you only got front light, you got back light, and you got side light. Everything else is a derivative, if you would, off of that premise, and it's all based on what sunlight, how sunlight affects an image or a person or portrait or a thing if you're shooting a still life. So, but these are some basic setups. Here's a flat light situation here down the lower left-hand corner. You can already tell where the light is coming from. Lots of light in the frame. I'm surprised there's no light on the background, but I guess if there were light on the background there, it would kind of wash that out. But they tell you exactly how they did it. Use a second light box or for the setup, position one on either side, probably at 45 degree angle. This is also a copy light setup too. If you have to copy flat work like prints or art and you don't want reflection or glare, this is another setup that you can use here as well. But it's a flat light. It eliminates all of your glare. This thing on Badger light, I don't get. Someone had a question. I just kind of over talked to. Not okay. We'll go to the next one.
Ramona, Bob, somewhere down the road, could you to talk about that metering bazookas you're mentioning?
Metering, yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, this is let's go back to metering. But again, these are all lighting examples. So those are in your supplement there. But let me go back to the metering thing here.
Let me ask you a question before you get into the metering, Bob.
Go ahead.
Now, with your one light setup, you don't necessarily need the metering, do you? Because you're going to have your reflector, and if you move it closer or further away, it's going to give you what you want in the background, right? Or it's going to open up your shadows, or
yeah, you will always need to meter, otherwise you're guessing at your lights, your amount of light you're bringing in. Let's go to that side if I can. Here it is. Yeah, you'll always need to meter.
We could probably use the whole class on a metering.
Say again.
I said we could probably use a class or a session or something on metering. I think.
Okay.
We can use help, in other words, on metering. I know I can.
Well, I understand what you're saying there. Let's go back and talk about some meters then. If you're metering through your camera, it's called reflective. If you're metering from the subject position, it's called incident reading. Most of you, and that's a good point, Diane, most of you are familiar with metering through your camera because the camera takes care of all of that for you. You don't have to do anything. But if you're using flash or strobe, this meter in the camera is not fast enough to record the amount of light put out through the camera. It's not fast enough. The meter, the strobe sits on top of your camera and it uses what's called TTL. It reads off the film plane and it makes the adjustment for you. But there's 2 types of metering, and that's something I'll put together. That's a kind of an advanced class option. One is flash metering, but it's incident, and then one is continuous light metering, and that's incident as well. but that's always metered from the subject position. But yeah, I'll put something together on that, Diane. But if you're taking light readings, you always want to meter from the subject position if it's an incident reading. So I'm reading the amount of light coming off of the light as opposed to the amount of light that's being reflected from the subject. If I reflect from the subject, the camera reads what's coming off the subject. If I want to meter the light, I take an incident reading and I read the amount of light that's coming off. And that's called incident reading. And you have to have that if you're using flash. Now, if you're using continuous light, where you are not using a strobe or a flash, then you could probably get away with your reflective light meter reading out of the camera. You don't need an incident meter. But if you're going to use a flash, you've got to have an incident meter. Where is it? We just had it. You've got to have an incident meter.
You said if we're using a flash, you have to have an incident meter. So all of these lights that we're looking at on this diagram, those are all flash on tripods or?
Yeah, most of them are, yeah. Now, a lot of times you might go buy a salt box, it's got some lights in it, that's continuous. Yeah, if those lights don't go off, they're on all the time, then that's continuous. You can use reflective light meter reading for that. You can use a meter in your camera because the light is a continuous source. And your camera can read that light. You just take a meter reading like normally would, just like you would be outside. The sunlight is continuous light. So if you go outside and take a meter reading with sunlight, it's the same as using one of those soft boxes with the light already built into them.
Okay.
But if you're using flash, if you're using strobes, you have to use an incident or flash meter.
Okay.
And these flash meters can be very expensive, anywhere from $400 to, I found one for about $50 that I use, and it works very fine. All you want to do is get a ballpark, and I'll do a thing on metering that will kind of describe that for you. But if you're using strobes, there's an advantage and a disadvantage to using continuous light. A continuous light source, you can see the light because it's always on. With a flash, you can't see. You don't know what's going to happen until after you took the picture. And some of the strobe meters come with modeling lights. But once you understand lighting, you'll be able to set up your own lights and you know what the light's going to produce, so you don't have to have modeling lights on them. But you do have to be able to record or to meter that burst of light. And that's what a flash meter does. And in this example here, it shows the shutter speed at 125 and it shows the f-stop at 9.5. It'll show that to you on the flash meter. And you set your camera to whatever that reading is based on the ISO of the output of the meter reading. So you'll do that. Now, the meter reading to the one to the right, the smaller one, that's for using outside if you don't use a reflective light meter reading in your camera. Most of the camera reflected light meter readings in your camera work very well. But if you're very picky, back in the day, we had to have a reflective light. We had to have an incident meter for reading continuous light. This is for daylight reading. This is not for studio. This is for continuous light reading. So you could use that one as well. And as I mentioned, yet I still have this meter. I commented on the price. I think I paid $70 for it back in 1978, and it sells for $200 and some odd now, that same meter, and it still works just fine. But one is measured, the incident meter is read from the subject's position pointing at the camera, and reflective reading is read from the camera position pointed at the subject. Now this incident meter here, it does have a bulb that you can take off. It comes with a whole kit of bulbs, a kit of slides where you can take off and read reflective light. You can use that as well. But most people use it for the incident, in the incident mode where these bulbs are on it. But yes, Diane, I hear what you're saying, meter reading.
Hey, Bob.
English that as well. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Hakeem.
Yes. Do you ever do a course on how to pose your subjects in the studio? Because I saw a lot of them coming at sort of an angle. Do you prefer that, or straight on?
Yeah, we did a module on posing. I'm not much in terms of posing. I'm more into composition. When I say composition, I'm looking at my subject from a balancing elements or moving the subject around. But we have a module on posing. I think Barry came in and did some posing for us. He built the thing.
Yeah, he did.
How to do
Yes, he
posing.
did.
He did.
And there's a module that we have that we can review on posing. It gives you different things you can do. But typically for me, when I'm posing a large group or posing anything, it's all about composition. So I tend to see things in chunks. So it's just the elements. I don't see them as posing, but yeah, we can do something. We can mention some posing. But
You
that
know,
would be-
our own Cynthia McCoy is very gifted in that area. Is she on?
Yeah, Cynthia does that very well. She works that step and repeat for us very well, and she poses very well. But I think Cynthia, is she there? Yeah, Cynthia's there. Yeah, but she can talk to you a little bit about posing as well. So
Yes, I'm here.
but, yeah.
You're tagged, Cynthia.
Yeah, Cynthia, and when you're working runway, you do pose. What do you do from them? I mean, is this derived out of some of the things that are, and this is kind of like open forum session here, along with the recap. What do you do in terms of posing? And that was in response to Hakeem's question.
Well, I sort of look at the clothing first to make
Yeah.
sure that if they're wearing a necklace or whatever, that it's straight. And then after I'm looking in my camera and it's like I can see it. It's hard to say, but I can see it. And then the first couple of shots, I may say, okay, I'm going to take it on 3. I take it on 2 because I want them to relax. And if it's women, females, I tell them to hold in their stomachs. So, because I don't want them just flopping all out.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
Yeah. Okay. So you do more styling than posing. But I think what he was asking about was, are there any specific positions? And yeah, there are some.
Yes, there are some positions, Bob. There are.
Yeah, and you kind of you kind of know those, and you kind of look at it. You're styling and composing. You're still looking at elements, but the fixing the hair, tucking in the stomach, fixing the jewelry, that's more styling. And then the positioning the body falls under the realm of kind of posing. And also how you place them in the frame kind of entail a little bit of composition. I mean, it's things you learn how to do over time, and it's almost intuitive. But yeah, there's a module that we did, like I said, on posing, and I'll present that. And it's very brief. It just tells how you handle one person, 2 people, how do you pose women. We can do something like that in terms of Hakeem if you're doing posing.
Yeah, my wife is good at finding the little hairs out of place and that kind of stuff.
That's all about styling. That's what not makeup, but stylists do on location for you. They make sure the hair is in place, the jewelry's all right, there's no things out here and what have you. But again, I always try to angle my subject. I don't like to take a photograph flat on, say the person standing up straight on, looking like what I call a mug shot. And that's you turn to give it some 3-dimensional quality. And that's composition there. You can shoot straight on, and there's a way to do that, tilting the head, dropping the chin. There's some things that I'll walk through there for you as well. And that same technique that Cynthia uses, once you establish some rapport with a person, say, okay, we'll take the photograph on 3, we may go 1, 2, and we shoot on 2 and what have you. And that's to kind of get them ready for it. And then you shoot right after 2, you shoot 3, you shoot the frame, you capture the frame there as well. So.
And Bob, one other thing, if they're wearing glasses, I always have them tilt the head down just a little bit so I don't get that glare off those glasses.
Yeah, so if you can see, I got a front light on me here. If I just tilt my head just a bit, you can see that glare go right out just by tilting the glasses up or down. You can do that. You tilt the head and you basically disappear some of that. So yeah, those are tips and techniques on styling and what have you. But yes, Hakeem, posing, and we got one on meter, and I'm not sure if we'll get that. We got 8 weeks. We got 6 more weeks to do this, so we may be able to get this all done this time around as well. Okay, other questions, recap wise. Let's go through this quickly.
I have a question on color gel.
Yep.
Color gels and reflectors. What is that exactly?
Let's go back to this one here. This shot here. on colored gels, reflectors. This is what they are. This is sometimes you can create scenes in the background. They're using the white scenes here, but they got a colored gel that makes the scene just look like it's blue.
Okay.
There's a gel over this particular softbox here that's producing this red light on her face. There's another purple gel back here that gives you this purple halo behind her hair on this side here. And there's a white light here, kind of cleans it up a little bit. And then you got a main light in the front. But these colored gels, they just kind of add some drama. It's kind of things they do to make it look a little bit more interesting, if you want to call it that. I'm not a big fan of colored gels. You see a lot of this done in stage productions. If you go to concerts and events where they're doing things on stage, they use a lot of colored gels. Let's go back to what there's here up here. But that's what they look like, and it's various colors, and it's usually these three colors here. You got, I guess it's a purple, but you can use these to add accents, highlights to your image. But a lot of your stage productions will use a lot of those types of devices there, and it just kind of looks nice when you look at it. They'll throw a blue light on the background or green light, whatever color that prompts your fancy at the time. You put that on the background. You may scrape the side of a person's face with a different light, and it gives some color. And you see this again a lot in concerts and live production. They use these colored gels and what have you.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so that kind of recaps it, I guess. There's your supplemental material. We showed you basic product lighting, and all of this falls under one light and reflectors, or one light and two reflectors, or one light and a single reflector. Two basic setups for me: one light and a reflector for people, portraits, and then one light and two reflectors for a small product. And the difference is basically three lights, one or two lights. And when I count reflectors as a third light. So, but the basic difference here, if you're doing product lighting, you always bring your main light from the rear. And what that allows you to do is to delineate the object that you're taking a photograph of, as opposed to putting one flat light or side light in from the front of it. The light from the rear defines it, and then the other two lights fill it in. So you never lose sight of the edge of the object when you are using a backlit or light from the rear type of situation. Every edge, every feature of it will be delineated, and then using the two fill lights to bring additional light into the foreground or into the front of it, brings in the detail. And then the fill light, another fill light, I could have gotten away with just one fill here, one light in the background. This light comes in this way from the back of it, and one light in one fill light in the foreground to light it up, but added additional detail by adding a light over on the side. So that's the basic setup for this particular shot here. So
I just have one more question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Where is it? Kelvin, bright white, should be bright white, clean light, 5500 Kelvin. That there's you have a, yeah, well, yeah, it shows there. Is that round one? Is that the Kelvin light?
No.
What is that one? The big one in the center?
That's just a reflector. It's called a beauty reflector, and it's bounce lighting. Kelvin is a color temperature.
Yeah.
And Kelvin is the temperature of the light. From sunrise to sundown, the light has different color temperatures, not like degrees of being warm or what have you. Early in the morning, it's 30 degrees in Fahrenheit or Celsius, I guess, if you're looking at it from how the light feels. Early morning, it's cold, warms up in the afternoon, and then it gets colder in the evening. That's kind of where it was taken from. But instead of measuring the coolness or the feel, Kelvin measures the color of light. So 5,500 degrees Kelvin is the temperature of the light, not the way it feels, but the color of the light at daytime. That may be a module we need to review. Lighting temperature, lighting temp. And you don't have to worry about that with auto, what's it called? Auto color, what's it? Auto color, what is the thing? I forget.
White
Auto white balance. That's what I was trying to think of. It becomes, we're so used to the camera taking care of this for us. Auto white balance takes care of that for you.
Okay.
If you set your camera to auto white balance, it's gonna determine the color of the light and set it to automatic to the proper white balance. If you're working with lights, you have to be aware of the color balance, the color temperature. And Kelvin is just Kelvin is like Fahrenheit. It's just a measurement of the color of the light. 5,500 degrees Kelvin is daylight, bright white daylight, and that's what most of these devices produce: bright white daylight. You can tone them down. You can make them warmer, or you can make them colder by putting reflectors in front of them, or putting gels in front of them, or what have you. So 5,500 is your standard. Early morning, the lighting is about 2,800 degrees Kelvin. Late afternoon, it starts to drop off again. But the cleanest light is somewhere between 11 o'clock and about 2 o'clock during the day. And that's somewhere between 5,500 to 6,500. 6,500 degrees is what's considered daylight. And then later in the afternoon, the light goes through the filtration of the sky and what have you, and it changes colors again. It goes a little bit warmer, a little bit yellow. And taking pictures, I'm sure late afternoon, you got a yellow light. The overall thing is yellow. It's a lower degree of Kelvin. It may be 3,200 degrees Kelvin. Typically 2,800 degrees Kelvin was light bulbs, incandescent bulbs. 5,500 degrees Kelvin would be the color of the light from a flash. And then 6,500 degrees Kelvin would be like about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But that just is just a reference to the light, the temperature or the color of the light. It's referred to as the temperature of it, but it's basically the color of it. And I've got, in parentheses here, noon. High noon is generally 5,500 degrees Kelvin. And your camera nowadays, we're so used to auto white balance. We don't think about this. You look at your camera, it's got 4 or 5 different settings. Open shade is a cooler light. You got a bluish looking light. And then there's another early morning, you got flash. It's got different lighting temperatures there. But that may be something we need to review as well. But we did that a while back as well. Light, color of light, temperatures, and what have you.
It's funny that when we deal with those temperatures, I think, well, for me, I'll just speak of myself, that the only time I'm really looking at that temperature is when I'm in Lightroom. And I do use that when I'm looking at my histogram, and I'll go over and, just see what's going on with the particular image. But that's the only time I use that light balance.
That's true.
Temperature.
And if you're in the studio using flash, you would be very aware of it, because each unit produces a different Kelvin degree.
Okay.
And over time, these bulbs, they tend to warm up, or we call them, they would warm up, they'd yellow up a little bit. So if they're producing 5,500 degrees when you buy them, as they get older, the light temperature and Kelvin may change. So
with a lot of use.
So you're constantly adjusting. Not constantly, but you'll have to make adjustments here as well.
Okay.
But yeah, we've gotten so used to auto camera and most of the functioning for you that this kind of stuff doesn't make a lot of sense when you're looking at what is Kelvin. And I think Barry taught a class on lighting. He talked a lot about Kelvin as well.
Okay.
So, but you can simulate color temperature by going into your camera, taking the same picture at different settings, at different flash settings or different auto white balance settings in the camera. And you can simulate the different lighting effects like that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, there's 3 modules came out of this discussion. So that's kind of, I guess we do recaps. Okay. And again, this was supposedly for basic folks, but again, it's always good to review from an advanced standpoint as well. My theory is that you're always somewhere. You're the basic, intermediate, advanced at all times. It's the same. It's always a constant learning process, and you find yourself back and forth in these different bailiwicks. And the whole point at the end of the day is to come out as a skilled photographer who understands the environment and who can go out and create and make a picture, or take a picture or create a picture. You got to be able to do all of it, whether you're at whatever level you come in at. Okay. All right. Other questions? Where we time was? Let me just check that. 9:44. We got about 10 minutes before we take a break, and we'll go into this discussion on all-inclusive lenses. Other questions before we break off?
One question.
Sure.
Is there or will there be a professional photographer?
That's a
What?
question.
What is a professional photographer?
A professional photographer is one who makes images for pay. You get paid for what you do. That's a professional.
Thank you.
Okay. that was a funny question, Felix, but I guess I
Yeah,
hope
it
that,
was.
yeah.
In a roundabout way.
Yeah, it was.
I always have funny things.
Yeah, you came in. You came in the back door with that one, Felix.
But if you get,
That's
I
my
got a
role.
question, Bob.
go ahead, Cal, if you want.
Okay, when you have several lights around you and you're going with a metering and you get an F8 here, F22 there, and an F16, how do you balance all of that out?
Multiplies, divides.
What you're getting to is lighting ratios. And the way you balance that out is you measure each light independently. And you make sure that one light, say for an example, both of these, say for an example, I'm at 5.6 on this light here.
Yeah.
And this light over here is also at 5.6. That's just, that's a 1-to-1 ratio. I would not have any modeling or any shadow on the person's face at all. It would just be washed out. And that's why you go down one stop for each light that you're using. And each time, and you're not putting out as much. This is the most powerful light. This is half of this light. This is half of this light. And this becomes half of that light, et cetera. As you go, B1 becomes half of that light, and B2 becomes half of that light. So that's how you balance it. If each one of these lights are the same power, then you're just totally overexposed or washed out. So
Hey, Bob,
hold on a second.
Okay.
Hakeem, hold on a second. So each light should be less than the previous light. And this mimics the sunlight again. There's only one sun, so there's only one main light. Every other light is subordinate to that one main light. So they should be less, unless you're deliberately doing something where you want to wash it out. Well, the use of lights could be the same, but they should be each succeeding light should be less. That's how you balance them out. And it's a 1-to-1, a 1-to-2, a 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5, etc. And you meet each light individually, because when you turn them on and they all sync up, you get a cumulative reading. And that cumulative reading is a combination of all of the lights that are firing at that time. And of course, you may have to make adjustments as you need. So you may want to, that maybe this light here is a little bit brighter, so you may have to back it off a little bit or power it down a little bit. The backdrop light generally does not matter, but you have to measure each one of them to get the proper balance. So that is why I would suggest that just for basic setup, use one light.
Yeah.
Use one light until you understand how to introduce those other lights into the equation. One light and a filter, and a reflector. And once you understand how to balance those off, then you can start introducing other lights. Clarence, does that answer your question?
Yeah, there's a lot more, but getting a good understanding. But that, because one of the questions that I did have is when you're talking about powering down your lights, we're talking about expensive equipment. If you got to power your lights up and down, not just not just a bulb or,
Yeah, you got what they call mono. I think it's called mono lights now, where you can dial in the power. You can dial in F6, F5.6. You can dial in F8. You can dial in the amount of power that you want to output and produce the desired result. But you never want to produce an image where you got multiple shadows, or you got competing lights. And on a one light setup will give that to you. You can take this image here and put in reflectors all around it. And each time that reflector, say if I put another reflector over here, this light is your main light. It'll bounce light off it into another reflector. And whatever comes off of this additional reflector will be half of what came off the original reflector. So that way you're not having to deal with lighting ratio, and you're balancing as well. So you could use two reflectors, maybe 3 reflectors. Each light coming off of the subsequent reflector will be less than the amount of light, about half of it, that came off the original reflector. So main light, say this is at F5.6. If I bounce light off of here, this will probably be around F11 or F8. And if I put a reflector back here, you get another reduction in the light as well. Whatever light bounces off this and hits this reflector will be less than what came off of this reflector. That way your lighting is always balanced. If you're going to use one light that way, you can do it that way as well. But you got to be able to see what you're doing, and that's when you hold the reflectors up and move the reflectors around so you can see what the light is all about. The silver reflectors are very good for that. And just the translucent or white matte reflectors also work as well, but it's a little bit more finessing that you'll have to do there.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be expensive equipment, because I've seen photographers use flash heads, just like the one you use on top of your camera, and have them set off on stands with the little remote triggers on them.
Yeah.
You look at the back of the flash you have now. If you go into the manual mode, you can set the flash at any power you want to set it at.
That's true. Yeah, but you have to be able to do those formulas.
Yes.
1:1, 1:2, 1/32, 1/8, or what have you. You can set as well individually. You can do that. That's
Bob, I bought some studio equipment before I got in this class.
Yep.
And I used it once or twice around the house, And back here for the holidays, I bought a soft box and some reflectors to add to it. Before, you got the backdrop, the umbrellas and everything. And I set this up in my garage over the holidays. And the pictures, oh boy, they were so nice because I was using just the soft box and a reflector.
Yeah.
And because it was in my garage, I just let the garage door up, and I had natural sunlight coming in and everything because the weather was nice. But the pictures and everything was so damn great. I almost urinated on myself.
Oh, wow.
I don't know whether it was, because I got that new camera. I don't know whether it was the camera, whether or not the composition or what, but everything was so nice. I was so excited about it.
It was that new camera, Billy.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll take that, Kelly.
Yeah, now the key to that is when you start to work like that, you got to be able to do it consistently over and over again, no matter what situation you go into or what have you.
And then you'll know what it is.
Okay. All right. Very good. Good discussion. Good feedback. Thanks for the request for a recap, Sharon. We appreciate that. So that, because yesterday we were going through this. Sometimes the stuff can be somewhat overwhelming, and people will sit back and not ask questions. And sometimes you just have to think about it before you can let it set in before you can come back to it and ask questions. So the recap was good, I think, in this case here. All right. Any other questions on this, Michael? Sounds like.
Yeah, Bob, I'm kind of afraid to even ask this question because it might open up a whole lot of cans of worms when you're doing the measuring of the lights and powering one up or powering one down. To feel like what role does distance play in all that calculation? So you're doing, instead of hit or miss, you do the powering up, then you go back and manipulate the distance from the field light versus the backlight versus this light versus that light. Or is there a calculation process involved in all that as well? Distance.
Yeah. Well, you always start with your main light. So when you set that main light up first, whatever distance you wanted to do, you set that light up and whatever mode you want it to be in, whether you want it to come from the side, whether you want it from front. If you go back to the supplemental material, it'll give you the settings for all those lights. But it depends on the power output of the light. You have to maybe move it closer to get the f-stop that you want. For an example, in this situation here, if I got this light on full power and I want to use f5.6, and when I set it up on full power and I need f4, it gives me like an f4 reading. Then I knew I need to bring it a little closer, so I move it in closer. Just the opposite if I wanted. If I want an F2 reading out of it, I need to move it back a little bit further. But you start out with a basic place to put the light where you want it, take a meter reading of it. What's my f-stop? If the f-stop is, or if you can't move it back before you dial the power down. But again, it's basically how you want to position it. So if I position this light here, it'll come across the face here. This is almost kind of a flat lit situation with an angle at this way. And that light is at 5.6. And I need f4. Then I would go in here and increase the power a little bit, or I would decrease the power a little bit on the light, or I would move it closer in a little bit. So if I wanted to, back up, I back it up a little bit. So if it's at 5.6, and I want to be at f4, I would push it back a couple of feet. There's an inverse lighting ratio that says for every 2 feet, you drop 1 f-stop. So if I want to move it back 2 feet, and if it's already at 5.6, and I move it back 2 feet, it goes to f4 because of light fall off. Not like the sun. The sun is continuous. There's no fall off there at all. But when you work with studio lights or any type of light that's man-made, the closer you are, the brighter it is. The further away you are from the subject, the less less light that reaches the subject. So I move it back and forth until I get the correct positioning of it. And do the same with the other lights as well. You just move them back and forth. And it's about 2 feet. 1.5 to 2 feet is your typical spacing. Move it closer or further away to get an F number, or dial it down. The convenience of most of your studio lighting is that you can dial them down. This works also for continuous light as well. So if you got a light that stays on all the time, the closer you move it in, the smaller the f-stop you're going to need. The further away you move it out, the larger the f-stop that you're going to need. And you determine what f-stop you want to need, what that you need. And usually that f-stop is around 5, 6, or 8. It's rare that you'll be using f11, f22 when you're using the studio lighting, unless you got some very powerful lights. You would be very rare. But it's around 5, 6, f4, 5, 6, or 8 is what you're typically going to find yourself using.
Bob, in other words, you're using what you see.
Felix.
Yes, sir.
Michael.
Yeah.
Michael.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob, so much. And don't be afraid to use your mute on Felix at any time. Just mute.
I'm going to turn that off.
But you're doing all these calculations, adjustments before you even take the picture. So once you take the picture, you find, how often are you finding yourself readjusting that? Like it's not giving you the look that you want, so you go back and do this whole thing again.
You don't have to necessarily do the whole thing. I mean, you make minute adjustments to it as you go. I didn't mean to go forward there. You may make adjustments to it as you go. But once you set this up a couple times, it becomes the same light. You do it the same way every time that you do it.
Okay.
And
you're also doing it.
You make minor adjustments.
Minor adjustments.
Yeah.
Because you're doing it all. You're doing all this. Your subject is sitting right there while you're making all the adjustments. So you really kind of know. You really have to know what you're doing, or you either give your subject a lunch while you work it out, because you have to make sure you get it right.
Yeah, no, your subject is not there. You should do all this prior to your subject showing up. Yeah.
Okay.
Your subject walks in and everything should be set.
Awesome.
If you change the lighting setup, have your subject go offset somewhere and go do something, but you should be not doing this while the subject is present. They may be over in the corner, they may be having a cup of coffee, they may be offset somewhere, but you're making these adjustments without the subject there. Because you get into adjusting the lighting of the subject, what have you, then it becomes you start to feel a lot of pressure. So you want to set
Yeah.
this up beforehand if you
You
possibly
do.
can. Beforehand. So all you got to do is step into the set and you start taking pictures. You make a minor adjustment, but you don't do any major adjustments when you got a subject on set.
All right. Thanks a lot. Go ahead, Felix.
Felix.
You just answered my question, so I need to say anything.
Oh, very
I'm
good.
through.
All right.
We're a team. That's good.
Okay. One other question. Go
You
ahead.
know, you said something that you haven't mentioned before just now, thanks to Michael's question. Disarming yourself when setting up those lights. That's a task. I mean, you know, you have to have a vision in mind when you're doing that and know your equipment, but disarming yourself by having your client step off, that is really good advice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get nervous sometimes.
Yeah, you do have to have, I mean, you don't want them there because there's things you're figuring out, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, lighting, once you do your basic setup, once you understand how you want to use lights, it's the same setup. I haven't changed my lighting setup and I don't know when. It's either front, side, or backlit. And I haven't, and once you understand what the concept, then you go and you set your lights up. My light is always over my left shoulder.
Yeah.
Relative to the camera position. It's rare that I have a main light from the right-hand side, but if I had to do that, I could flip that and I flip the reflector over to the left-hand side. But once you understand how you want to use lighting, and it's always the same setup. It's always the same setup. And then you just have to adjust for the environment. If you have to move on location with your lighting, it's still the same setup. And mine is always over my left shoulder, somewhere between my left shoulder, far out, and then very close to the camera. It might be up over my head, but it's rare that it comes around to the right side of me. And then you become familiar with that setup, and then you work from there.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. I think we're going to take a break, and then we'll come back and try to get into that overview. We'll have a discussion. Again, this has been open discussion and recap, if you would. And this is what the Friday class is about. The advanced group. I mean, you ask questions and you kind of go from there. So let me stop the share, and we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and get into our agenda and go to the all-inclusive lenses, which is something that Wayne brought up as well. So again, it's all about learning, and no topic is too advanced or too basic. Whatever it is we need to talk about, we talk about it. And that's kind of how I feel. That's kind of, what I feel my job is to kind of educate you as best I can on what I know and the knowledge that I've had. All right, so 10 o'clock, 10:02, and I come back about 10:10 and start up again. Seems like. Okay, any questions on what we've previously covered before we go to the next module, which is basically our open forum and an overview on all-inclusive lenses? Any questions at all before we move on? All right, okay, very good. This next module, I added it to, I sent the agenda out as a revised agenda, and I added it in as a cheat sheet. It's on all-inclusive lenses. I went out online trying to find some stuff that talked about all-inclusive lenses. I didn't find what I was needing or wanting, so I kind of free form from what I was finding. I was piecing stuff together. But when we talk about an all-inclusive lens, this is from the feedback session. I think Gwen mentioned that, and it's a very good question. Most photographers, if you're going out to shoot or capture images, and you're going out on assignment, you take everything that you figure that you will need. But what if you just want to go out and just shoot? How do you do that? What lenses do you carry? Can I grab one lens and just do everything? Carrying 3 or 4 lenses around plus a couple of camera bodies can become very cumbersome at times, and can become very not restricted, but it's a lot of weight to carry around. So what can I do if I just want to go out with one lens? If I'm just feeling like I want to just go out and do some snap shooting, I guess, and not be prepared, loaded for bear, so to speak. And that's what I kind of developed this module, this cheat sheet around. So what I want to do is just kind of open up a discussion on that, and maybe share some of your personal favorites and what have you, or how you do these things, and how someone else may do them as well. And I've got a couple of slides that we're going to walk through and talk through and ask questions and just kind of bounce off of the knowledge of each person who's done something similar. This overview here, this is always included in your handout or in your cheat sheet, but it talks about the different types of lenses. And the ones that we're going to kind of concentrate on for this particular session will be your short to medium telephotos, which would be somewhere from 24 to 70 up to about 70 to 200. But this is a sheet that's over there. It's kind of give you some general characteristics. So if you're making decisions on lenses or what lenses to use, this is kind of what you want to kind of look to. So go ahead. Who's that? Okay. All right. So the next slide is what I want to start the discussion around, and I call it pros and cons of all-inclusive lenses. There's always been this notion of I just want one lens that'll do everything. I don't want to carry 4 or 5 lenses around. I just want to grab my camera body and one lens that'll do everything. And I went out to the websites for Canon and Nikon and did a search. I went out to the web and did a search, and the list on the left is what came up for Canon. They're all-inclusive lenses. I had to actually go out and piece together one for Nikon, which is very similar. There are 2 styles of lenses. You got your APS-C lenses, which is your crop frame lenses, and then you got your full frame lenses. The lenses that most people are talking about, they refer to them as travel lenses. I don't want to carry a whole lot of gear. I just want one lens to do it all. And they're referred to as travel lenses. Nikon, when they introduced their lens back in the early 90s at 24 to 120, it was held to be it was held as a street sweeper. The photojournalists and photographers said, this is the only lens I need because this will cover everything that I want to do. And that was the one lens that they would carry with them. But as that initial 24 to 120 came out, it was discovered that it wasn't that great at all, so they had to redo it. It was a 24 to 120. It was a 3.5 to 5.6, I think it was. And then later on, they introduced one that was 24 to 120 that was an f4, which was a much, much better lens than that initial lens. I actually owned that initial lens, and I didn't realize the issues that I had with it, but I do know that it was one lens I could carry everywhere. And I take pictures. I could do portraits with it. I had a little bit of a wide angle with it. Anything in between 50 millimeter, 35 millimeter, it was an all-inclusive. You only need to buy that one lens, and it worked very well. So typically, the all-inclusive lenses are referred to as medium to short telephotos, and they run in the range of 24 millimeters, which is wide. 28, and we'll talk about that in a minute. 28 is not really that wide. It's in the wide angle category, but not really that wide. So if you get to 24 up to about 105, and anything in between 24 to 70, 24 to 105, and then 24 to 120 has been the basic range for most of the medium and short telephotos. Now there are some of these short to medium telephotos that go beyond that, and we'll kind of talk about those. And some of you actually own them. I think Nikon has an 18 to 200, which is every lens that you'll ever need. And then they've got a 7 to 300, which is also very similar to that. But 18 to 200 covers just about everything. They just announced a 28 to 75 2.8, which is unheard of in that range with that kind of speed, so to speak. Most of them in the range of 3.5, 5.6 or f4. The 28 to 75 2.8 is a very fast lens. But it's not that wide. You pick up a little on the telephoto end, up around 75 or so, and you lose about 4 millimeters on the wide angle end. And supposedly that's, you get into the strategy of that. There's not many lenses in that market. I think Tamron also just announced one as well, a 28 to 75 2.8 that sells for a little bit less than this one here does as well. But that's what's referred to as an all-inclusive lens. And the question that came up is, the question I want to ask of you is, what type of shooting do you do? Do you need something for long reach? where you want to go up in the 200, 300 millimeter mode. And of course, as you get into 300 or 300 millimeter mode, the lenses get longer. But most people want to carry something that's very short and very workable and that can get most of the work that they want to get done. That for me turns out to be the 24 to 85. I'll show that one to you in just a minute. But there's a full frame lens from Nikon called 24 to 85. It's a 3.5 to 4.5, which is a very, very compact lens. Which I'll pull up here in just a minute. But there's a 24 to 85 that kind of does that for you. Keep in mind, the faster lenses, they tend to be a little bit more robust and they tend to be larger and more expensive. And most people want to get away from that. So what you're going to find is most of these shorter lenses, these street lenses, are going to be in the 3.5 to 5.6 range. You see that in the Nikon column as well as in the Canon column. They've got an 18 to 135, which is fairly inclusive. And it's 3.5 to 5.6, and it's a small lens. They're 50 to 85 is the same thing, small lens. And then they've got a 24 to 105, which is a f4 lens. When I did this pull up, this search, Sigma, a couple of Sigma lenses popped up under the Canon mounts. The Sigma 18 to 35 and the Sigma 24 to 105 for your full frames. But these are what's regarded as all-inclusive lenses. There's some trade-offs when you're looking at the slower lenses, so to speak. The 2.8s or the faster lenses tend to focus faster in what's referred to as low light scenarios. I wouldn't want to take a 3.5, 5.6 into a concert. I would want to take something like that. I would want to use a 2.8 or faster lens if I possibly can, and not necessarily because of the not necessarily that I want to use it at wide open, but when I'm focusing in a concert scenario, the lens is wide open to start with, so it gathers light and it focuses faster in low light scenarios. Sometimes those 3.5 to 5.6 lenses have a hard time focusing in darker areas. But if I'm using it on the streets as just a walk around type of lens, it's going to be ideal for brightly lit scenes and everyday use, such as snapshots and walking up and down the streets. 3.5, 5.6s are fine for that. The lenses in order from 3.5, 5.6 also tend to be very compact and very lightweight and somewhat inexpensive, and it's relative speaking in terms of inexpensive. They tend to be very compact. I'll give you an example on these of the lenses. If you look at these lenses on the bottom here, this is an 18 to 55, and try to put them in terms of relative size. An 18 to 55, that's pretty wide cut range. And it's a very small lens, very lightweight. You attach that, nobody knows you've got it. You can carry it around all day. You go up to scale from an 18 to 105, and it's the same thing, 3.5 to 5.6, but very small lens. And then even from 18 to 200, which gives you a really wide range, it's almost as small as well. A little bit taller, a little bit longer as you zoom it out. This is at the 35 mode. So if I zoomed it out to 135 or 200, the lens will extend out a little bit further. It gives you a capability to just have one lens on your camera as you're walking around, taking travel pictures or street photography. And again, I mentioned they're a little bit slow focusing in low light scenarios. If you're working in everyday and if you're working in a brightly lit scene such as street photography, you don't have any issues with them. I would be leery of going into them from a concert standpoint, from concert action, or anywhere you got a darkly lit scene. So, all right, questions on these the pros and cons. I kind of ran through those kind of quickly.
Bob,
that comes to mind when you look at that standpoint.
Bob.
Listen, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. My question is, I was asking where you were saying the 18-200 covers a lot of bases.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a 18-300, which is like my go-between. I mean, I use it more than anything else because I can do a close-up with it. I can extend it into a telescope lens. I can bring it back to to another lens. So it's like 4 lenses into one package.
Yeah.
So my question to you now so that in my case, what I'm thinking that would be a perfect everyday lens.
Yeah, the 18 to 300 is a very wide range. I mean, in fact, that basically you just need one lens for that.
Okay.
But again, and what you want to be aware of is that there's it's going to focus slow in low light situations. So don't take it to a low light situation.
All right.
So if you're just snap shooting, you want to have one lens. 18 to 300 covers everything.
Okay.
But what are the trade-offs? I don't know what the speed of that lens is. Well, imagine it's between 3.5 to 5.6 is probably a variable focus lens. So and that's a good lens, and that's but again, when you telescope it, as you mentioned, it becomes a somewhat longer lens. But if you're in a snap shooting type mode, daylight, brightly lit scenes, everyday type mode, it probably works very well. That's a good range to have. So,
okay.
But if you want something more lightweight and more compact, then you go to something like an 18 to 105 or an 18 to 55, and that gives you there.
I have a 105 micro, but that thing weighs 2 pounds.
Yeah, and you get again, it's a specialized lens. A 105 micro. If you're doing macro work with it, fine. If you're doing portraits with it, fine. But it's a specialized lens, and there's probably a 2.8 or a 2.5 lens as well. And that's the thing you'll find as your speed of the lens goes up. The speed of the lens goes up, the larger the lens becomes as well. Let's see if I can get this one over here. I've got 2 lenses. The one on the shorter lens is a 24 to 85. Are we seeing this okay at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then one on the right-hand side is a 24 to 70. So this is actually more distance, or more, a longer, has more reach, more magnification than the 24 to 70. The 24 to 70 is a 2.8. The 24 to 85 is a 3.5 to 5.6 or 3.5 to 4. Which one is it? Let's see it. It's a full frame lens. It's a 28 to 24 to 85, 3.5 to 4.5. But you can see the difference in terms of size. The 2.8s are going to be larger. It has more glass in them. The 3.5 to 5.6 is going to be more compact, but I can reach further with the 24 to 85 versus the 24 to 70. So there's a trade-off. It doesn't mean this lens will replace the 24 to 70. But if I don't want to deal with the 24, this is a heavy lens. And once I put the hood on it and put it on the camera, it becomes not an issue. You just deal with it. But if I want to just go out snap shooting, this is a lens I put on the camera. And I've shot a lot of images with this particular lens. And this is kind of, for me, a jewel in the rough, finding something this compact. And I did a lot of shooting with this before I got the 2470.
Why is it, Bob? No, I think I may answer my own question. Why is it that some of the cameras carry a more larger lens? Like those two you're holding up a while ago, that's a Nikon, right?
Yeah, these are Nikon lenses. The 3.5s are smaller, and there's less glass in them. The 2.8s are faster, and there's more glass and more elements in them. So, and as you go up the line there with the 2.8s, these are designed for heavy duty professional use, go anywhere, do anything type of work. These are designed for basic everyday shooting, snapshots and what have you. For street photographers, use the smaller lenses. And the 3.5 to 5.6 doesn't matter because you're going to be shooting at 4, 5, 6, or 8 most of the time. So I never use this one wide open, so to speak. But that's typically what happens there. So if you're looking for something, and again, I can only speak from the Nikon side. I can speculate from the Canon side, but I can speak from the Nikon side because those are the lenses that I use. But if I just want to carry one lens, that 24-85 is typically the one is typically my go-to lens. On the Canon side, they're 24 to 70. Their 2.8 L is a large lens. They've got a 24-70 f4, which should be a little bit shorter, but it's also an L lens as well. But it should be a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller than the 24-70 2.8. Now, some of you are Canon shooters. Who's got a 24-70 f4 and who's got a 24-70 2.8? They're basically the same lens. One is faster. And have you been able to compare the two side by side in terms of which is larger, which is smaller? Is that who shoots a 24-70?
I have a 24-70 f4.
Okay, and then anybody got a 2.8? 24-70 2.8? Okay, all right. I mean, I haven't been able to compare those two side by side, but I would assume that the 24-70 2.8 is a little bit larger than the 24-70 f4. I would assume that, just basically because there's two lenses. They're basically only one stop apart, but there's a reason for that one stop. Somebody wanted a lighter weight lens or a shorter lens. The 2.8 I know is going to be heavy, and it may be a little bit longer. At least case in point, we saw the two here. Nikon's 24-70 and 24-85. 3.5 in one hand and f2.8 in the other hand. They're going to be vastly different in terms of size, the length of the lenses. You can see that basically on the screen there. So, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, is that?
I can tell you from experience with the Canon lenses, when you get that L designator, that's supposed to be a quality bump. Yep. Those lenses are heavy as a brick.
Yep, they're made for professional use. That's their.
I have the 24-105, and it's not terribly long. Oh, but God, it is heavy.
Yeah, that's supposed to be their premium lenses. That's for professional usage. Very robust is a term I like to use on them.
Yeah, and the other thing is, you can save money, especially on the APS-C lenses, when you get those real broad spectrum of lenses. With the further they go, like instead of 25-105, you start going from 18-135. And I owned an 18-135 too. I still have it for an APS-C. Yep. The trade-off there, I mean, why wouldn't, well, who wouldn't love that? It's cheap and it does everything. When you start examining your work closely, like you do when you come into a class like this, they just aren't that sharp.
Yeah, that's the trade-off there. Yeah, absolutely. They put all the best stuff in the premium line, if you would. I'd like to see that 15-85. That looks like a good lens from a straight standpoint. But it's, again, as you mentioned, it's APS-C, and there's nothing wrong with an APS-C lens. It's just that it's a crop frame lens, and you're using just a little bit smaller sensor than you would be with a full frame. But there's a marketplace for all of them, so to speak. But I guess a major takeaway, and I've got one more slide I want to go with, is that and again, I was just wanting to incorporate or bring into this slide here, what are the trade-offs? The 2.8s are going to be faster and heavier and more robust. The L line is going to be faster, not usually faster, but more robust as well. They're heavy, as Jose just mentioned. And the 3.5s will be your compact, lightweight, and sometimes they are a little bit less expensive than your pro. No, I don't want to call them pro line, but your 2.8 lenses are a little bit more expensive than those. So if I'm a Nikon shooter, this is where the next slide comes in. This is my solution, my personal solution. You're looking at this is, let's just say this is a D750. This has got 24-85 lens on it. Very short, very compact footprint, and takes very good images, good captures, and what have you. And I brought in metadata to kind of show you how it's being used, but extremely sharp, super sharp, if you would, and you can go into a number of environments with them. You looking at the image on the left, shot with a 24-85. It's a very versatile lens, from 24 to telephoto, medium range, super sharp photos. They also use it for videos as well. It's got built-in image stabilization, small, compact, discreet, when it's coupled with a similar camera. Now, if you put this on a D3 or D4, you kind of defeat the purpose. But if you put it on like a D700 or a D750 that doesn't have the additional battery pack, you've got a very small, indiscreet camera that you can carry around. And you can go just about any place with it. If you want to shoot portraits, I don't have an example of a portrait shot here. If you want to shoot portraits, you've got that 85 range. And if you need to do wide angles, you've got that range to cover a wide area. We can get into a photograph. And again, this is kind of a 3/4 length portrait here, probably around the 50 millimeter range. Yeah, it's shot at 65 millimeters, the one on the top here. And then the one on the bottom was shot at 58. So you got normal lenses in there. You got a good range of lenses inside of that 24 to 85, if you want to include that as an all-inclusive lens. Just one lens, if I had to have just one lens, and I did not need the speed. Of course, the 2470 is ideal 2.8 if you need the speed. It's an ideal lens. It will take you into, it'll get all the work done for you, but it's a very heavy lens. The 24 to 85 is short, compact, and that's an ideal lens for just running up and down the streets where you don't need to be shooting at 2.8. You've got a lot of light and you can work with a smaller aperture. One on the top was shot at f8, the one on the bottom was shot at 5.6. I don't need 2.8 in those scenarios there for this particular lens, but it's a nice, easy footprint to carry. If you want to go even smaller, what I use, I've got a Nikon Coolpix. It's a prosumer style camera. It's completely adjustable. The drawback is it's only got one lens, and this 18.5 millimeter turns out to be about a 28 millimeter when you put it in 35 millimeter terms. It is a 2.8 lens. It's very, and it's a non-interchangeable lens. So 28 is kind of a nice street camera or a nice compact camera. This thing you can put in your shirt pocket or your back pocket. Nobody knows you've got it. It does have a full sensor. It's a full APS-C sensor or crop frame sensor. Unlike most of your point and shoot cameras, it's got a much larger sensor. Has the same menu as a Nikon DSLR camera. So if you're familiar with Nikon cameras, you can do that. And again, I mentioned discrete, pocket size, small and compact. And it uses standard SD memory cards, and it does a good job. The image on the right-hand side here, upper portion, was taken with this camera. This is a Coolpix A. ISO 128 millimeters fixed at f8, 140 for a second. And the one on the bottom was taken at a higher ISA, 3200. At 5.6, 160 for a second. So that's another small, all-inclusive. I don't want to carry around a big camera type of camera and lens combination. These are my personal solutions. When I don't want to carry the large camera, and I'll stick this in my pocket, I'm good to go. And take some very good pictures there as well. So with that said, this is kind of where I kind of wrap it up at, and I'll try to open it up for Q&A from you at this point in time. So, Gwen, I hope this helps, because I mean, that question basically came from you. What's the best all-inclusive? And it looks like from a summary standpoint, the 24 to 85 range is where you want to be. And you don't want to go after speed. You don't want the larger, faster lenses because they become a lot larger and a lot more bulky and complex. But if you want to go after, if you want the compact, small camera just for everyday, or small lens for everything, that's the range that you want to be in. All right, so let's open it up for Q&A at this point in time. We'll close it out and we'll take it in from there. Questions?
Question, Bob.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Good. Okay. I'm glad that was helpful. Good. All right. Michael?
Bob, based on what you just said, it really, the lens selection depends on what type of photography you're going to be shooting. So if I were to do, say, event photography, like I was just asked to do something for a friend they have like a recruitment expo or something. It's going to be inside of a hall. What would be the best lens for that type of shooting?
2470 or 24 to 85 if you want a Nikon. Well, that's in general. Yeah, it's 24 to 70 or 24 to 85. That's for either Nikon or Canon. You're going to be inside a facility or a room or some type of event that's usually pretty close, and you don't need to reach You don't need the reach of a 200 millimeter. So 24 is wide enough to work interior, and 85 is long enough or 70 is long enough if you want to capture headshots inside a room like that. And I assume you're going to be using on-camera flash, like a flash you'd be using as well. So, and that gives you that covers just about all of it. Now, if you're in concert areas, if you're doing something, when I go out to shoot in any environment, I usually will take 3 lenses: 16-35, 24-70, and then 70-200. And it's rare that I use the 70-200. Most of the work will be done with the 24-70 if you're doing an event style shooting. But every once in a while, and I just have to go prepared for whatever it may pop up. But if you know you're going into a small environment, such as a space where you've got in a room or an event, then your 24-70s, 24-85s would be perfect. And you can go in that environment and do all you need to do.
Would that hold up as well then if you did something in a, let's say, maybe a smaller setting, like in a house event or something? Same would hold.
Yeah. Now that is the tighter the environment becomes, the wider the lens I want to use. But a 24 works well in small rooms as well, because you got a wide angle lens. This is over on this left-hand side here. This is shot at 58 millimeters, which is almost normal. Now, and I've got the ability at this point to drop down to 24, which will show twice this frame. This is shot at 54. That's about half of the 24. So I could have gotten a little bit wider shot there as well with a 24. But it was shot, it's almost a 50 millimeter lens that you're working with at this point. Yeah, it worked well. 24-85 is almost ideal. And I say 24-70 because that's what I'm typically used to, but a 24-85 would do that if you've got one in that range. Your 18-55s would do the same thing, because I know a lot of you may have 18-55s on your D7000s and what have you, but your 18-55 would be even more ideal for a tight setting, because you got an extreme wide. 18 is pretty wide, and then 55 takes you up to your normal range. So 18-55 would be good there as well if that's what you own. You don't want the telephotos. The long lenses in a tight environment, such as a small room or small setting, just kind of get in the way. So somewhere in that range, 24-85, 18-55 would be almost perfect in that scenario.
What about a 17-40?
17-40 is a good choice as well. Now, 40 is not really long, but 17 gives you enough wide if you are in a tight area, such as a small room. 17 gives you that wide angle, and 40 gives you enough. 40 is almost a normal, so you got like about wide angle to normal range there. I like a 17 or a 16-35. Those are ideal for tight settings, or if you're doing close in work. Now, the thing with those wide angle lenses that most people don't get is that they want to step all the way back and encompass as much as you can. But ratchet that thing out to 17, which is its widest setting, and then getting as close as you can without going beyond your focusing range. You'd be surprised what that 17-35 or 17-40 will cover for you. A lot of the work we did in the Victory Room, I shot with a 17-35 or a 24-70, but 17-35, I could take a shot of the entire space and then crop out a lot of what I did not want from a compositional standpoint. 17-40 is ideal, 18-55, and certainly 24-85 would be a nice just overall lens for just about everything.
So Bob, you're leaving out the 50?
No, the 50 is included in that. I said 24-85, there's a 50 in there. 17-40, just on the other side of that. 16-35, there's no 50 in there, but it's close to it. So no, I wasn't leaving out the 50 if you got 24-85. Keep in mind your zoom has multiple lenses in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob, this is Flo.
Hey,
And
Flo.
so, hey there. So for a place like the Botanical Garden, a 24-105 would be good.
Yeah, 24-105 is fine for botanical gardens. Yeah. Wide angle, it's a short telephoto. 85 to 100 is short telephoto. So yeah, you be good for botanical gardens there. But again, what I was thinking is that when they asked the question about what's the best lens just to carry around, they're looking for compactness, and you don't want to carry a lot of lenses. But what they refer the 24-70 to 24-105s is considered an ideal lens for just about everything. And the reason for that is I got a little bit of wide angle, I got a little bit of telephoto, and I got everything in between. I got 50 in between, I got a 35 in between. It's enough of it's one lens that you can carry around and get most of the things you want to get done. This 18.5, this is actually a 28 millimeter lens. So between 24 and 85, you got the 28 in there. So look at these four images. The 28 or 24, you can use it as wide angle here. I think this may have been a Pano actually, but you can use it as a wide angle lens. You can use it inside as a portrait lens for 3/4 lens figures. You can get a little bit tighter here. It's a 65 for closer in types of shots, and then you can use it as a 50 as well. But these four images kind of exemplify what you're able to do in that 24 to 85 range. So when you mention 24-105, you go a little bit longer than the 24 to 85 range. So you got a little bit more flexibility with it as well.
Good. And I have one more question for Jose. What lens did you say was not very sharp?
I had, now this was on a crop sensor camera, but I had a 18-135. Now, it wasn't a terrible lens, but I found that most of the ones where you started trying to include too much, going from too wide to too long, if you look at reviews online, find somebody, people that do reviews all the time, and one that you think, it sounds like he knows what he's talking about, or you've had reviews by this person before. And usually they'll show you all kinds of test shots, and you see that those lenses aren't terribly sharp, the ones that encompass a really wide angle and a really long end together.
Yeah, I have an 18-200, so I should not expect too much sharpness out of that.
But you shouldn't expect the same thing you'll get out of 24-105, and just like the person shooting a 24-105 can't expect the sharpness they're going to get out of a fixed focal length, like a 50 or an 85. I own the Canon supposedly great glass L lens, 24-105.
Yeah, that's the one I have.
And I also, the L lens, but I also own a Sigma macro lens that's an 85. Now, macro lens will shoot, normally. It doesn't have to be a macro shot. And that is the sharpest lens I own. It is sharper than the 24-105. And it costs, I don't know, half of what the 24-105 costs.
A Sigma.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I have that thanks to you, Jose.
Excuse me. Say again. Ramona, were you saying?
I'm sorry. I have a bug in my throat. I said to Jose, thanks to him, I have that Sigma lens.
Okay.
Isn't it great?
It is great, yes.
I just get the most perfect, crystal clear pictures out of that lens.
No, it's very good.
Think about when you start thinking about sharpness as well. Think about most of your lenses are going to be sharp at in the middle portion of that lens. So think about the F number that you're using as well. Whenever you start using those lenses at maximum aperture, you're going to run into some sharpness issues in the corners or in the edges. So how do you compensate for that? You stop it down to its optimum sharpness. All of your lenses are designed to be sharp at their optimum sharpness at their at a certain aperture. So keep that in mind as well. So if you're shooting a cheap lens, so to speak, wide open, you can expect to find flaws, especially on the edges. But look at the f-stop and then figure out which is where it's supposed to be optimally sharp at, and then stop down to that f-stop.
It makes you want to ask, what's the point of a wide range lens?
You want the speed. The reason for that's the speed 1.4, for an example. If you are in a situation, the larger aperture lenses will focus faster than the less aperture lenses. An f1.4 will focus faster than, say, a lens that's 5.6. You can also go into lower light level situations, such as concerts in dark areas or dark arenas, and come out with a higher shutter speed that you can use. That's where those lenses are designed to be used. If you want something that focuses fast, then your maximum aperture, your wide aperture, such as 1.428, come in very, very handy. If you're in darker environments, you want something focused faster. If you're in a daylight situation, 4 and 5.6 is no issue for focusing there. But if I go into a darkened room, 4 or 5.6, we may have trouble in terms of focusing. The focusing may be a little bit slower. Autofocus is a little bit slower. So
no, but I was asking,
unless you're shooting concerts or dark areas, you don't need the faster lenses at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Flo. What's the point of why are you making a lens that goes from 18 to 200?
Yeah.
It's not, the quality's not up there. Well, right. Most of them are considerably less expensive.
Okay.
And I mean, they're made for a different level of photography. Okay. The person who's going traveling and they got a crop frame sensor and don't want to carry all those lenses and they don't want to spend that much money, this is the market that lens fits into.
Sure. Oh, yeah. You follow that?
Thank you. I do. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So speed, you have to justify whether you need those faster lenses or not. If you're not consistently in that situation, then you really don't need them. And again, unless you're a professional where you don't know what situation you may be in, these 2.8s and faster lenses are designed for professionals who may be in a situation where they have to get a picture. They can't say, well, my lens was in focus in it, or I couldn't get the image because it's a 3.5 or 5.6. So there's different markets out there for it.
Carrying that flash makes a difference. If you're not getting the sharp images that you want. I picked this up from Bob. Everything I know is from him. But I shoot with a flash outdoors and indoors. I have a lens here. It's a 28 to 300. And it's not fast at all, especially when I'm indoors and I don't have a flash, but I take it outdoors. Again, you got full light, you get the sharp images, and I get some of that speed, especially when I'm doing sports. But carry your flash with you if you're not satisfied with your images and you're not getting that sharpness that you want. That light entering into the image is what helps the sharpness to come in. Is that right, Bob?
Yeah, that's true. Your flash will add a little bit more contrast, and you tend to get a little bit crisper image, so to speak.
Yes.
And but as long as you can balance that, you don't want to get to the point where
why it looks sharper a lot of times? It freezes that motion.
True. Yeah, true. Yeah. It compensates for any kind of shake that you might do there.
Yeah.
So again, the slow lenses work very well if you're going to use flash on them, but don't over flash it or don't over make it look to the point where it looks like it's too much flash.
Yeah, I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Errors.
Guys.
Sometimes.
I do some really strange things. I just shake my head and I'm just so grateful no one else could see that junk but me.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't show that.
Oh, he'll be like, ah.
That's one of the reasons why a long time ago, we have that discussion where a shaking was happening and we said we have to tie on a post on somebody that they have something to lean on.
Okay, true. Yeah, but basing yourself on posts, telephone posts, cars.
That mean if you don't have one, you're going to have to carry one with you.
There you go. All right. Any other questions? We're about to wrap up, and I just went through the homework list. I hope this is helpful for most of you. This is, part of a
Yeah, Bob, I have a question. It should be quick and easy. At what point, when you're going wider and wider, at what point do you start experiencing distortion from using a wide angle?
Distortion. Let's talk about that. That's a good point. A good question to ask. Distortion. Most of your newer lenses don't distort. They call it distortion. It's more like volume deformation as a term that they use. The closer you get in, the edges start to pull a little bit. Distortion is when your straight lines start to curve. When your lines curve, that's distortion. But pulling is not distortion. Most of your more modern lenses do not distort. If you get a cheap lens, you will see distortion. And again, you have to define what distortion is. Distortion is not pulling. Distortion is straight lines curving. And it's called a pincushion type of effect, where it kind of bulges out. That's a straight line pulling. You can correct some of that in the software, but most of your modern lenses do not distort. They tend to pull, where you see things on the edges of frame, they pull outward, so to speak. That's why if you're working with people and things on the edges of frames look a little bit larger, a little bit wider, things that are closer look a little larger. That's not distorting. But keep in mind, true distortion is when you see straight lines, in particular straight lines curving. Convergence, where straight lines tend to meet, is okay. That's just because of the way you got the camera tilted. But true distortion, those curved lines, you don't see much of that anymore. So I don't know if that helps or hinders your question.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. The extreme is the fisheye lens.
Yeah, fisheyes, yeah.
And I've seen different degrees of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So fisheye lenses, they show 180 degrees. Nikon, or Canon too, makes a fisheye that does not distort. It gives you 180 degree, but nothing's distorted. The edges will be pulled, be a little bit longer, but the straight lines will still be straight. So just keep in mind, when you look for distortion, look for straight lines that are curving. That becomes distortion.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah. Okay. Jose, you good? Before I go to.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hakeem.
Hey, Bob, this is Hakeem. Did you get my homework? I sent an email.
Did I call your name?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I did. I called your name. You may not have been back, but yeah, I got your work.
Okay, cool. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Let me stop the share here then. I guess we're done with this one here. And go from here, get out of here. Take a look at the lovely faces again. There's everybody. Okay. Hi, Flo. Good to see you. Those who I can see: Jose, Clarence, Felix, Barrington, Sharon. Everybody else is behind the avatar. There's Theron.
Hey, Bob.
Behind the avatar.
Yeah, everybody's behind it.
So,
Go ahead. You had a question.
yeah, Bob, I just wanted to add comment on Cheryl.
Yeah,
What
no,
she said
yeah,
about the
go
curve.
ahead.
I just want to ask the learning curve she experiments. And when she says she takes the pictures and she nobody see them, that's a learning curve.
That's
I get
true.
them all the time.
Yeah, that's what it's called. That's what it's called. You should see the ones that I don't show.
Wow.
And you won't learn that if you don't try. If you don't, realize it.
That's
It's called
right.
failing forward, I think it's called. Yeah.
Opportunities to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, opportunities to grow. That's another phrase for it. There you go. All right, very good then. Okay, I think it's going to kind of wrap us up right about 11 o'clock. It's about time to go. We've kind of overstayed our welcome. So I'll see you this afternoon. We can continue open forum and we'll pick up and look at our homework. Got lots of it to look at. All right, Cynthia, it's all yours.
Okay, everybody have a great lunch. I look forward to seeing you at 1.
Okay, bye.
Sounds
Sam.
good.
Hey, bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.